So any conditional columns that you have in which you want to do any conditional formatting, any data modeling, if you want to do in any columns, so you can do it through the Power Query. I think we took that topic in the initial phase where we can do any changes in the Power Query or any exchange of the data or anything. Like for example, I'll tell you. For example, if you remember in the product column, we created using a product size description. If let's suppose I want to create this by using like I want to change it, like let's say in the same column, I want to make the changes for this one, for my product data. So let's say I'll use a blank query. Let it open. Let's say I'm not creating a new query this time. I'm going to my initial table. This table has been opened. So if I click on this, sure. Let me just bring it down so that you guys can see my screen properly. Yeah, let me put this down. Yeah. Now, let's say here, I can see S, L, all of these stuff. Okay. So now, if I want to, let's say, replace this with something of that sort, like S with anything. So what I can do is that I can just go to replace values. So see, it's just will see find value. So you have an advanced option over here as well. You can say match entire cell content. And I can say, let's say S2 maybe small. See, it has been changed. Similarly, if I want to say L2 large, that's replaced. M2 medium, and access to extra small. Always remember to click this match entire cell contents. Otherwise, what will happen? It will do just a change for a single entry. So that's what you don't want. You want to have a replacement for all of them. Then XL. And always remember the way it is being mentioned in the column name. If it is like in capital, you have to be write in capital. If it is smaller, you have to be in the smaller. So Power BI is very case sensitive in that case whenever you write a formula or anything of that sort. So you have to be very careful on that part, specifically when you are writing an if condition or you are writing a replace or anything of that sort. Be very specific. It's not about Power BI, but other tools also does the same thing. But yes, Power BI is case sensitive for sure. Okay. So this is how you make the changes. Now, if you say close and apply, so now you will see the changes are getting applied. Okay. So see, now this time I made the changes in my existing column. So these changes are getting applied. So you have to wait for a few seconds because it takes some time to upload and to work for it. So yeah, that is done. So yes, now we got this. We can go to this section and we can go to a product table basically. See, my changes have been done. So I told you two methods. Either you can use a formula, you can write a formula and do it, or you can go ahead with the Power Query. Any of them is better for you. Like what happens with it, if you are replacing anything, the only advantage of using a formula rather than using a Power Query will be, so basically the Power Query applies only for that particular table at that point of time. So whatever replacement you have done will remain in until that table is there. If let's say there is a refresh data or the data get refreshed in any which ways, that Power Query doesn't remain. But if you have written a formula for that, let's say after 2-3 days, your data get refreshed and you get more data. So that time in the same column, as you have changed S to small, M to medium, like that way, but you will able to see the product size whenever a new data comes in, you'll able to see it as soon as it get refreshed. You will see the column as S, M, XL, like it was previously there. But now if you have added a formula and created a new column on that base, so then in that case, it will not be that scenario. So whatever formula you have applied, that if S is there, then it should be small. So that description would represent. So that's the only advantage of using a formula tool rather than using a Power Query editor, because Power Query editor remains for few, like for that particular file and for that instance, but your formula remains for a longer period of time. That's the only difference that we have, and that's a very good advantage as well, because that makes your report more dynamic as compared to this one, because herein you are going manually and doing the changes, but herein once you are written with the formula, you are done and dusted for that purpose, and then you can go ahead and work with it. So that is one of a major advantage of having this formula and doing this work steps and everything. Okay. So I guess that was about the formula creation and Power Query and all of that, wherein we learned about merging, about expanding the columns, about looking, and also shaping and combining the data. So we did that, right? Now, before coming to the DAX query, like what is the DAX query and what is all of that, before coming to that, let's just see few more Power snippets of some data sets. So let's have some information on the theta modeling size, or maybe the calculated measure that is more important, like sum of per unit profit, like this way. So we have an option to calculate the measure, or we have an option to create a calculated measure in the table. Okay. So if I take you to the data, and I just take you to that table, per unit profit. So see, that's a measure which I have created, and that's a measure which is created by minusing the product price to the product goods. So that was a measure that we created over here. Per unit profit. That's a measure that you created. Okay. So see, this is a sign of a measure. But let's say you go to table tools. So see, you have a new measure, you have a new column. So this is your new measure. Whenever you create a new measure, that's a DAX function that you write. Per unit profit is something wherein you write the DAX function. And whenever you create a new column, that is also a column created in the data. So everything that comes on is something where you created a calculated measure. So here you created a calculated measure wherein we are seeing all this: sum of cost of goods, sum of unit per profit. So when you open this per unit cost, see, you can see summarize. So this is something which was a measure that was created across. So measure will always have a like this sort of a sign and all of that. In product table also, this is a sort of a measure that I've created. So they will have a different sign altogether. So how we create the measure? The same way. Like we write a formula per unit profit. So I write order price minus. So from order table, I deducted the order price minus order product. That is per unit profit that I got for that particular table. So that's called a new measure. So whenever you create a new measure, you click on this one and a new measure gets created. So it takes few seconds to open. So you have to be very patient with Power BI when you are dealing with it. Because yeah, it takes some time to open it and to work with it. So yes, in that case, you have to wait. See, that's a measure. You can give the name of the measure and you can start writing your measure, whatever you want. And the measure will be created. And if you don't want, let's say by default it has been created, you can just simply cancel it and it will just close that measure for you. So no measures will be created. So that's how. The same way we are creating the calculations for a new column, we are creating the calculations for measures. Now, measure is something which is added up into a data set, a calculation that we create. So what's the difference of using a measure rather than using a column? The use of measure is that it will not make your data a bit heavy, because in new column, the column gets created. A new column gets created every time in your data set. So if you're creating a new measure, so that is completely dependent on the columns by which you have created. Okay, so that doesn't export out in the form of as a part of your data, but it's just a calculation that you have created and it will exist on your table. So as soon as those columns will be changed or as per the changes have been done, your measure get updated. Although the same thing happens for a new column as well. Obviously, whenever a new data comes in and you want to refresh for a new column, the same thing will happen for a new column. The only difference is that creating a new column makes your data a bit heavy, because whenever you export your data set or something of that sort, so there's always the increase of the columns is there. Whereas measure doesn't increase the number of the columns that you have. It's just is a measure that exists in a data as a form of a new entry. That's all. But it doesn't add up as your data set, or it doesn't make your data a bit bulky or heavy in that case. So that's the major difference that we have over here, and we work with that. So yes, that is about your the major difference between creating a measure or column. But there is no major effect of that. It's just up to you if you want to create a new measure or you want to create a column or anything of that sort. But it is always advisable that whenever you are working with the tables or you are showing as a pivot table or a table of that sort, so in that case, it is always advisable, rather than creating a column, always use a measure. Or because in that case, your sum will be coming accurate. So the total that is shown up, sometimes that total in the table at the end, the grand total doesn't show correctly. So for that reason, if you are using a measure and then taking those values in the pivot table, then the grand total will be shown correctly in that case. So that's one thing, probably that is something which you can remember. But otherwise, for the calculation purpose, either you create a new column, you create a measure, really doesn't matter. Both of them will work in the same way and will function in the same way. So completely your choice or completely your call at what you want to make for. Either you want to make a measure or you want to create a column, completely up to you, whatever you want to do for that. Okay. So that is about the data modeling, and that is about how to create measures and everything in your data set. Okay, so let's move to the next. So you have an option to create calculated tables. There's an option to create a calculated table. So if you remember, we created a table as well, wherein we created a union table, right? And I showed you that. So this is nothing but a sum of total sales per quantity that I created. I created a calculated table on that side. So wherein I created a table from there and I basically done that data. Okay. So that's how we work with the data and details and everything of that sort. Got it? Okay.